Run things rude boy, Nabil Aziz, becomingthealphamuslim.com and the Becoming the Alpha Muslim podcast. Welcome to another episode. And today we're going to try something new. We're going to do a video recording. And I think I might be trying to continue this whenever I do interviews now, because it makes it easier when I put my stuff up on YouTube for people to have something to look at.
Right.
So today I have a special guest with me. We've known each other on Twitter for a few months now, and I don't know why, but we keep finding these interesting people on Twitter. His name is Jay Campbell. He is a champion physique competitor. He's the founder of FabFitOver40.com. And he is just a general all-around badass. If you find him if you look at his website, he looks absolutely amazing. No homo. And he's been on testosterone replacement therapy for the past 15 years. And over that time, he's learned a lot, and he's helped possibly tens of thousands of men optimize their hormones and live better lives. He writes for Iron Man magazine as part of their anti-aging, as one of their anti-aging specialists. He's got another website called TRTrevolution.com, and also he's involved in some other projects. Primarily, I wanted him on here because he is the author of the definitive Testosterone Replacement Therapy Manual. And that is basically a book that I'm going to review for becomingthealphamuslim.com. And this interview is basically a supplement to that, because we're going to talk to Jay about a few things on, you're optimizing your hormones, testosterone replacement therapy, and all of those things. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you might have heard Alexander Juan and Antonio Cortez on the show, and we touched on this issue of testosterone and things like that very briefly and not in that much detail when we were talking about strength training and living a healthy lifestyle. So today we're going to do a deep dive on that, because I know from my side I'm fairly new to this TRT. Having your high test levels optimal and things like that. And I'm pretty sure very few people in my audience are aware of this as well. So, Jay, with that very long introduction, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Nabil, man, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored, humbled, and super excited to be here. You have a very big audience. And like I said, I know that community, the Middle East specifically, in that geography part of the world, is definitely lagging Western culture in its understanding of hormone optimization, but you're clearly, an evangelist, and you are definitely doing an amazing job in spreading more information. So you're going to be doing, that part of the world a great service. And again, I'm, like I said, humbled to be here today. I love talking about this. I'm extremely passionate about this. As we'll talk as we get deeper into the show, this is an epidemic. It's an unrecognized epidemic by the medical community, but, for anybody who's paying attention and has their eyes open and they look around, you see, widespread effemination of men, emasculation of men, just high estrogen, low testosterone males, and it's sweeping the world. This is not just located in the Western part of the world. It's obviously, you see it, it's everywhere. And we're going to get into the causal factors and why it's happening. But yeah, so I'm definitely, in my mind, I consider myself, really at the forefront of this. This is going to be a movement. I'm clearly, with TRT Revolution and the people that I work with, and Alex is, somewhat partnered with me. This is a huge, huge movement that we got going forward. And so I'm super excited to be a part of it.
All right. And with regards to the book, what was going on in your life that was sort of the catalyst to you actually writing this book? I know this book is the culmination of many years of experience and working with people in testosterone replacement.
Sure.
So why did you feel a need that this book, was this just the right time for the book to come out?
It's a great question. And, you probably know this, maybe some of your followers don't, but Mike Cernovich and I are very close friends. We're probably best friends. I mean, I know he and I have known each other longer than anybody else in the world. Mike slept on my couch when he was a 17-year-old kid. So we go way back, and him and I have always been students of this game, to not reveal everything. I wrote for a lot of like underground newsletters and like bodybuilding publications online when the internet wasn't the internet of today. And this was, in the late 90s and in the mid 2000s. At that time, you had to have a lot of anonymity because, it just wasn't as legal. It wasn't, optimizing your hormones was not an accepted medical practice at those times. I mean, obviously, and we're going to talk about this, but the demonization of steroids, the demonization of anabolics, the demonization of all that made it all very much an underground world. And so I was always at the forefront of that world, but in total anonymity because, again, I couldn't legally come out and say I'm Jay Campbell. So I wrote for a lot of different places. I've always been a student of this. I actually worked with a doctor. I can't really go into the details because I've been made to sign disclosure agreements and NDAs, but I actually worked with a doctor that was involved in the big Major League Baseball Balco drug scandal. Because I was kind of helping advise some of his patients, and some of his patients are a who's who list of Major League Baseball players. So I can't really talk more about that, but always very in the know, very knowledgeable, incredibly well studied. And again, all self-taught. I don't have any kind of medical background. I did minor in molecular biology in college, but I don't have any formal medical background. But I've been a student of this for literally like 17 or 18 years. So to answer your question, Mike and I were talking about this on some podcasts that he and I did back in 2013, and he just was like, "Dude, why don't you just write a book? I mean, you have more knowledge about this than anybody." And I was like, "Yeah, you know what? I probably should." But again, I was a little bit reluctant. I have a successful white collar career in real estate and doing other sales and marketing and consulting and stuff like that. So I felt like I didn't want to bring attention to myself at that time. So what I did was I wrote the book and I sent it to a bunch of different people. I actually sent it to Rick Collins, who's the founder of Steroid Law. He's like literally one of the biggest professionals, attorneys in the world when it comes to bodybuilding, pro bodybuilding, MMA, all this stuff. And he has a, very big website called Steroid Law. I sent it to him. I said, "Hey, Rick, please read my book. If you like it, you find it valuable, I would love to, I'll pay you to do a legal review so that you can indemnify me." And he read the book, he got right back to me. Rick's a really good gentleman. And he said, "Jay, wow, your book is phenomenal, but I'm going to not lie to you." He says, "I can't take your money because all it takes is one senator to get a hankering for you. And then before you know it, you have a $250,000 fee to me to keep yourself out of jail." So the reality was at that point, once he sent that back to me, I was like, "We're done." Mike was like, "You can't put that out there, bro. It's done. Just let it go." So luckily for me, and this is a year later now at the end of 2014, I sent the book to a bunch of people in the community. I sent it to Nelson Virgil. And Nelson Virgil at the time was the guy that had written Testosterone: A Man's Guide, which at the time was the number one selling book ever written about testosterone. Nelson is a very close friend of mine. He's an amazing man. Obviously he has HIV. He's been a 35-year survivor of HIV, and he's huge in that community. And he's an advocate. And obviously he's very famous too for writing his book. And he has Excel Mail, which is a huge men's website about all of this stuff. So anyway, he read the book, and we weren't friends at the time. And he was actually out of the country. And so he didn't get back to me till like 3 months later, but I get this email from him in the middle of the night, and it says, "Who are you? And we need to talk," and blah, blah, blah. So then, him and I talked, and he was like, "Jay, this is the most amazing." He was like, he was freaked out. He's like, "Are you a doctor?" He's like, "What are your credentials?" I was like, "No, I'm just an underground guy that, knows a lot about this stuff." I wrote this book. So anyway, he told me, screw Rick Collins, and Rick, if you watch this podcast, I love you, buddy, but he's like, "Don't listen to any attorneys. This is must deliver information to the world. I'll help you, whatever you need to do. We need to get this published." So then it was back on, and for a very short amount of time, Mike and I were going to do it together, but then Mike, blew up and his world got too busy. And so it just became, my project, and it was basically published in November of 2015. And then subsequently, since to this day, it's now the number one selling book on TRT ever written.
That's amazing. And it's like almost a brand new book too. It's amazing that it's taken so long for like a book like this to be published. Something that's so comprehensive. I was going through it, and like you pull out, all of the stops.
Yeah, there's 242 studies in there, and to be honest with you, Nabil, like I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm not trying to hype it. The next book, the Advanced Strategies version, is the be-all, end-all book on anti-aging.
Right. Yeah, you're
I mean,
working on
this
an
book
updated version.
is so next level. Like, it's so next level. Like, anyone who reads this, I don't care if you're like the highest level, brain surgeon, cardiovascular surgeon, or you're just some bro, in Istanbul trying to figure out how to, improve your body and in the context of health and longevity. And that's the thing is like, my book is not a steroid Bible. It's not a performance enhancement Bible. It's nothing like that. It's literally a book designed to teach men, and ultimately, eventually, it'll be one for women. My wife is working on something, but to optimize our hormones, from a safe standpoint, so that it enhances longevity and that you live the longest, most productive life possible. That's all my book is about.
Mm. And okay, so let's talk about, as I mentioned, my audience are like we're newbies basically.
Sure.
So let's start from the sort of very beginning. What is testosterone, and what is its function in a man's body?
Sure. So I'm not going to go into a deep molecular, metabolic, explanation. I always will default to the book. Anyone who is a reader of yours, I will literally give them the book free. We'll make the PDF downloadable for free so they can read it. It's definitely a quick read. You can read the book in 3 hours, as you know, but it definitely does have science in there. And as you know, I've indicated in the portions that are really deep molecular and endocrinology, it says nerd alert. So I have it segmented so that any man, regardless of intellect or background in this, can read it and make sense out of it. And I also wrote the book, and Mike helped me with this, so that the chapters are laid out that you literally could just pick it up and go to any chapter that individually applies to you and your unique life situation and read it and make sense out of it. So it's like every chapter is standalone. But to answer the question about testosterone is not a drug. Okay, it is a molecule, and it literally is the molecule that is the sex differentiation molecule for males and females. Women who want to become men in this transgender, comment movement or whatever the hell's going on in that, take testosterone to become a male. Okay. Yeah. So it's essentially like the lifeblood molecule and sex defining molecule of men and women. Now I could go deeper in endocrinology and talk about it, but I think that's enough for men and women to understand to watch this show. And its function in the male body is literally, and in the female body is, dude, it's literally, it does everything. I mean, they're finding now, the latest research, and I put this in the new book, is testosterone actually grows new brain tissue. Okay. So if there is literally a holy grail molecule in the human body, it's testosterone. Now, it has always been vilified for many reasons. And I'm not going to put my tinfoil hat on. You and I can put our tinfoil hats on in about an hour. Yeah. But the reality is that it's vilified for one specific reason. And I just got off a podcast with a doctor in the Midwest, and we talked for 20 minutes on this. And it's vilified because the pharmaceutical industry controls Western medicine. I'm sure it's global now too, but and the pharmaceutical industry wants people sick, fat, and dying. Okay. Right. Addicted to medicine, because that's where the cash cow is. That's where the money, like Chris Rock said, the money's not in the cure, the money's in the medicine. Right. So at the end of the day, testosterone, because it's so life building and it's so powerful in its ability to literally optimize a male or a female's life force, literally their vitality, that it's been demonized because it's not something that they don't want. Modern medicine, the pharmaceutical companies, they don't want people walking around as supermen or superwomen. Okay. So it's been demonized for a long time. And then obviously it was also demonized when it's taken in super physiologic dosages in the performance enhancement community, which is bodybuilding, track and field, weightlifting, on and on and on. So it was vilified in that way too, because, people do get sick. People did have problems. There was enlarged hearts. I mean, there's never really been any clinical study that could say provably that using super physiologic dosages of steroids would cause, a faster death. I mean, yes, it does lead to other things. There are inflammatory markers that are, increased or exacerbated when you take super physiologic levels of testosterone, or any anabolic steroid. But the reality is that there's no provable data. The majority of people that are like pro athletes and MMA guys and people that have abused stuff are also taking recreational stuff. So there's no real way. But again, the media always, as you know, is always going to glom on to that central tenet, which is drugs are bad, testosterone's the worst, and you can't take testosterone because it's going to make your balls shrivel up and your hair fall out and all these other, silly propagandized statements about the drug that are not even true in reality.
Right. And what are some of the, it seems like we're just fed a lot of misinformation about this topic about, steroid use in general and performance enhancing drugs. What are some of the major misconceptions that people have about taking testosterone in what you describe in the book as a clinically administered dosage? It's
a great question. Probably the best question, number one question that most people have and are in fear of taking testosterone. It goes, and again, I'll default to the book. This is all laid out and explicitly explained in the book, but it really just goes back to the idea that most physicians, let me go back even further. In the standard patient care model of medicine practice, testosterone is not taught. It's not taught in medical school. There's no standard patient care model for it. Even like the practical guidelines in Western medicine is created by the Endocrine Society. And the Endocrine Society is a joke too. I mean, their shit is manipulated and changed and all that. So there's no real guiding law for any doctor to really understand. Now, obviously, there's brilliant physicians all over the world that do practice this and understand it. And we call it, inside in the industry, we call it interventional endocrinology because it's just constantly moving all over the place, understanding how to balance testosterone and estrogen and optimize hormones. But so not having that standard patient care model, it was just very easy for even the medical community to look into like the bro science lore and look into, the propaganda that's disseminated in the athletic community about testosterone and steroids and all this stuff. So it just kind of, literally through osmosis got into the medical community, and then people just became fearful. And as you know, the media is just so effeminized that literally anything to do with masculinity or something that's pro that line is immediately going to be attacked. And as you can see, I mean, I could talk about this all day, but almost every time one bad article comes out about testosterone, and it's usually not even a bad article, it's just the way the media spins it. Every single popular media, AP indexable site will literally have a story about it. It's incredible. It'll happen like every day. And I mean, obviously I have Google alerts for everything that comes out on hormone optimization and test. So I'm constantly getting emails and seeing these things, but like I'll see like 25 articles come out in a 10-minute period. So again, there is definitely, and again, I don't want to go too tinfoil here, but there is definitely a contingent of the New World Order that controls, the indexable, obviously very liberalized media that does not want masculine strength and masculine males. They want men to be cucked, or whatever word you want to use, to kind of be dumbed down, to not be, optimized masculine males. And you see that all the time. So that obviously also plays a role, and most men are just ultimately end up being confused.
Yeah. If you look at it from the women's perspective, it's sort of like people saying, what happens when people say birth control has harmful effects, right? The birth control pill specifically, which is basically the female hormones, right? Exactly.
Well, I mean, it's a good point because there's a lot of studies that are coming out now. And I don't have any of these in the book, but my wife will have these in her book. The usage of birth control in the last 30 years, and again, this is mostly Western states, but I'm sure you could extrapolate it into the Middle East. It's degraded into the water supply and the food supply, and
it's turning us into women.
You've got massive endocrine disruption, not just with women, but men. I mean, not with just men, but women too. So everyone's hormones are pretty much, bouncing off the wall now. It's really difficult to be optimized unless you're working with a physician and you're doing all the other things, both natural and pharmaceutical, to keep yourself optimized. And as you know, we could talk about this more later as we get deeper into this. My argument is that the only way that you can live an optimized life, depending on your age, when your shit starts to break down, is you have to intervene, and you have to be proactive, and you have to start doing this, and you have to understand how to do it. You can't rely on medicine to do this. They don't have a clue. 1 out of every 1,500 doctors can optimize hormones. That's probably the statistic right now.
Wow,
it's crazy. And over in your part of the world, bro, you and I have talked about this. There's nobody.
Yeah. it's just the bros in the gyms that do it. But that's that's for guys that are trying to.
I mean, only 50% of those guys know what the fuck they're doing. You know,
Yeah.
but there are really smart guys in gyms, as you know, without a doubt.
Yeah, exactly. It's experimental, right? So it's all trial and error. So they figure out sort of what works.
But there's been guys that have been using. I mean, I always say this. Look at the old classic bodybuilders. You know, the Frank Zanes. I mean, Frank Zane and I are personal friends. And Frank Zane is 72 years old, and he never did a super physiologic dose of tests. He was just a beast in the gym. He's a very high conscious, spiritually evolved man, and he just never abused his body. And he still looks amazing. He's 73 years old. He lives in San Diego, North County of San Diego. But, he still goes to bodybuilding shows and conventions. But the guy has one of the greatest physiques in the history of the world.
Right. And I mean, among sort of bodybuilding purists, sort of Frank Zane is, I guess, for a lot of people, the ideal sort of aesthetic, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. But, I mean, he's a perfect example of what you just said. He's a guy that was using testosterone for 50 years. And he's perfectly fine. He's perfectly fine. So my argument is because when you get the real purists and you get the real academics and you get into a debate about this, they'll immediately go to two things. They immediately go to, well, you've got to suppress your body's natural production for the rest of your life. And then the second thing is there's no long-term understanding. Who knows what's going to happen? Well, again, my argument to those two things is one, at 30, you're losing 1.8% of testosterone a year for the rest of your life. And that's data from the 50s. Yeah. We already know that our environment is way worse than that. So let's just say, hypothetically, you're losing 3% a year at 30. You're fucking at half your testosterone level at 40 years of age that you were at 20. Is that worth living that life and then making an argument that says, I got to replace my natural production? You don't have any natural production, motherfucker. Right? And then number two is, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? You're literally going to sit here and tell me that you would rather not take testosterone and be addicted to pills and modern medicine and diseases of aging versus the possibility that testosterone is going to make you live a life of amazing vigor and, like energy and vitality. I mean, come on, who's going to choose that route? So that's, I love to debate guys on that.
Yeah, I mean, that is if they say, there's no long-term, we don't know what's going to happen long-term. Well, long-term, we know that the environmental situation is going to get worse, right? I'm not a doctor. This is just a logical conclusion. Right? And humans in general are going to be in a worse situation,
right?
Because of the way the environment is going and, in general, the degradation of society and things like that. So that seems a bit strange to me that they would object on that basis.
No, they're just fearful, dude. I mean, most of the time, these guys are literally low test themselves, right? So what do we know is the number one symptom of low test? Indecisiveness.
Right.
Brain fog and indecisiveness. So if you're indecisive, you can't pull the trigger, then you're going to question everything.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, now we've sort of nailed down exactly what testosterone is. And just from my reading of the book, like testosterone does I don't know, 15 to 20 different things in your body.
More than that, man. It does every metabolic function it affects. It affects insulin sensitivity, it affects neural degeneration and degeneration. It affects everything. I mean, insulin, you and I could go crazy. I'm really into molecular bio. Insulin sensitivity is the number one determinant in life expectancy. Now, you don't get many people to admit that because you have to be a really bright academic person, really looking at the latest data and research about molecular genomics and stuff that goes on at a super, super level, low level where, very few people even see this. But they now know that the gut biome determines length of life. Okay, so if your insulin sensitivity is really good, you're probably going to live a longer life because you're going to avoid all of the diseases of aging that come from inflammation. Inflammation leads to degradation. Degradation leads to cellular death. So that's what causes age. I mean that's how you die. And aging is obviously all those diseases that stem from that. So when you understand your insulin sensitivity and then you live a life that's designed around, minimizing insulin expression, you're going to live a longer life. And some people are just super genetically blessed. They just, they got the luck, they got the genetic luck that they have incredible ability to be insensitive to insulin. They can eat like shit for 55, 60 years and their insulin sensitivity is just so strong and overpowers and they don't have any of the diseases of aging. They don't get fat. But then, the average genetic guy, who's an endomorph by nature, dude, they look at a freaking half a slice of pizza and get fat from it,
Right. So now insulin sensitivity, just for like explaining it as if a child would understand. So it's the difference between, storing your the carbohydrate intake as fat versus being lean, right?
Exactly. So I'll give you a very lay explanation for your audience. Basically, insulin sensitivity is if you eat an apple, and apple's probably not a good carbohydrate, but if you eat an apple, just so it's simple to understand, you're going to have some form of a response genetically to that apple going down your gut and creating a glucose surge. So if you're extremely insulin insensitive, that means that you're probably, if you think of from a bodybuilding training standpoint, you're probably a mesomorph. You're naturally lean and muscular, which means that your body is going to shunt that insulin right away. Okay. So when it's shunting it right away, that means that you can eat more carbohydrates, which are going to allow effectively, again, control that insulin. It's going to push that insulin, that glycogen, the stored form of carbohydrate, the stored form of sugar, glucose, into your muscles. So you're going to be leaner and more muscular. Now, if you're the opposite of that, you eat that apple and your insulin goes boom and spikes, then that means that you're extremely insulin sensitive, not insensitive, sensitive, which is going to make you essentially a soft person, fat most likely. And if you're not fat, you never eat carbohydrates. Does that make sense?
Right.
So the middle ground is where most people fall. And the problem is, though, today is that engineered food, GMO, boxed stuff, gluten, all this crap, this engineered shit makes people, it overwhelms their insulin sensitivity, regardless of whether they're naturally insensitive or sensitive. And it makes most people fat. Like the doctor I just did a podcast with today, bro, 64% of the United States is morbidly obese. 64%. 64%. So the World Health Organization just did a study like 2 days ago that says that by the year 2020, the expectation is that 70% of the world will have type 2 diabetes.
Oh my God.
So that's all insulin sensitivity. This is understanding this. This is the biggest problem that the world faces. Now, obviously, testosterone and deficiencies and hormone deficiencies are right up there, but it's all part and parcel to this. So it's like, if you're watching this show and you're listening to this, talking about this is the number one thing, and you care about your health, and you fucking better. Yeah. You need to understand your insulin sensitivity, and you understand your insulin sensitivity from two tests, from an H1ABC blood test and a glucose tolerance test. Now, if you're, in a fourth world country and you're listening to this and you don't even have a doctor that can do that stuff, you can literally do your own personal test when you eat like a potato. If you eat a potato, if you get tired in under 5 minutes, like you feel like, oh my God, I got to take a nap. And that means you're very insulin sensitive. That means that your insulin spikes when you eat carbohydrates. So that's just like a basic test that anyone could do, but it's better to get your blood test with. And that's the H1ABC and also glucose tolerance.
Yeah. So I'm insulin sensitive. So I have trouble like handling a lot of carbs. I think it's gotten better now since I've gotten back to training over the past few months. So I feel a bit better. But in general, can't handle them very well.
Yeah. 75% of my family is too. I don't have like optimal bodybuilding genetics. Like I have above average genetics. I mean, I was an athlete. I was a basketball player. So I'm kind of long, my muscle fibers. I'm kind of a combination between an ecto-meso, but dude, through my understanding of pharmacokinetics and pharmacology, and then just using supplements, I mean, I've turned myself into a beast. You know what I mean? Like I have low body fat. I have a very, very blunted insulin response. I mean, we're not here to talk about this today, but every person in the world at 30 and older should be on metformin. Metformin is the most powerful drug in the world. It is now being studied. It just started literally 2 weeks ago. And it's a giant trial, randomized trial of 45,000 people. It's going to go on for 10 years. It's called the TAME trial. But they're going to be using metformin as the first tested literally in vivo as the first anti-aging drug in the world. Now, anyone who's in the Life Extension Foundation community of the world, which are some of the smartest people in the world, they've been using metformin for fucking since the 60s. You know, there's people taking 4 grams a day of metformin. I take 2 grams. I take 1,000 milligrams in the morning and 1,000 milligrams in the evening. And that has literally changed my genetic structure, or not structure, but code. I am much more insulin insensitive than I ever was before I started using metformin. And metformin actually also has a cumulative effect in skeletal muscle tissue, so that over time you can lessen your dosage depending on your lifestyle and your goals. Everything is always goal determined. And you still will have massive suppression of insulin regardless of what you eat. So like I say, I tell people this all the time. I'm not, unless I'm dieting for like a photo shoot, and I don't do that very much anymore. My wife and I are going to Cabo in 3 weeks, so I'm doing more cardio and eating less carbs now, but I can get completely shredded and I can still eat fucking ice cream and pizza because I've literally learned how to maximally suppress my insulin signal through the usage of metformin. Now, obviously I'm smart. I do other, you know, I use not other medications, but other like hacks and stuff like that. And all of this stuff will be in the next book. Everything that I know that I've learned in 25 years of doing this and also talking to the smartest people in the world is going to be in this book. In fact, we have a chapter that's called Agents of Change. And the book is worth buying it for this chapter alone, because we are literally going to give you every medication, both underground and legal, that you can take to completely change your physique. Literally change your physique. Doesn't matter your genetics. You can be a fat person and completely radically alter your physique if you follow the instructions in the book.
Right. So let's take let's take me as an example now. So this metformin stuff. This is like way advanced. Like you guys, this is way advanced. So right now we're still, the discussion in the sort of Muslim community is, you know, are low carb diets good for you, or should you be vegan? You know, that kind of lifestyle stuff. Okay, nobody's talking about, you know, TRT and hormone optimization and, you know, supplements and things like that. So I feel fine.
Sure.
Why is it important for me to know my testosterone levels? I sleep okay. My mind is okay. And I'm not as smart as I used to be, but, you know, boners are okay.
Right.
So am I fine, or should I still, you know, get myself tested?
You should so that's a great question. I mean, so my book, again, I always default. My advocacy, and it does start earlier now because we have so many guys that are high estrogen who are, you know, really emasculated in their early 20s. It's important for the number one reason it's important is because you do truly need to have a baseline understanding of your metabolic profile. Okay, so beyond testosterone and thyroid hormone and other stuff that's going on hormonally, you want to have a good understanding of what's going on to your biomarkers metabolically. So that includes your lipids, which is your fat, you know, your cholesterol, your liver panels, your immune function with your CBC. So I don't want to get too esoteric, but you want to understand what's going on metabolically. And you should literally, again, if you can afford this, you should understand, you should take a test once a year. Starting at 30, you should be doing a test once a year. If you're on TRT, if you're starting to optimize your hormones, you need to do at least 2, because you got to understand if everything is working once you start the medication. So so let me just take a step back so guys know, and again, this is all in the book, but there's the number one goal. There's 2 goals in optimizing hormones, but the number one goal is to balance your testosterone and your estrogen. Okay. When you maintain balance between testosterone and estrogen, that's when you're considered quote unquote hormonally optimized. The second number one overriding goal of hormone optimization is happiness. Do you feel good? Yes, I feel fucking amazing. I'm Jay Campbell. I can jump up and, you know, touch God and give him a high five. I mean, the reality is like, how good do you feel, and are you balanced? If you're not balanced when you're on testosterone or your hormones, you're going to have like irritability. You're going to kind of go from here to there every now and then. And that happens. I mean, when guys first start on this stuff, and again, we're not even factoring in quack physicians who have no fucking idea what they're doing. This is, hopefully you're working with a progressive physician, but there is a time zone or a time limit where you do have to determine what is optimized. And sometimes another medication, and those are called aromatase inhibitors, that's an aromatase inhibition medication, is necessary when you're on testosterone so that you balance your estrogen. Some guys genetically overproduce estrogen when they have testosterone. Some guys naturally overproduce estrogen because they're fat. They have, you know, slow metabolisms. They're endomorphic. Some guys, you know, genetically overproduce estrogen because they drink too much fucking alcohol. Okay. I'm not gonna get into alcohol, but alcohol is literally the worst drug on the planet. It's the worst drug. Of course, it's also the number one sold drug. Hello, do the math. But alcohol is a nerve toxin. Alcohol creates cell apoptosis, which is cell death, and it alters DNA. And they have many studies on this, but they're, of course, completely suppressed. I mean, you can go on Medline and you can do PubMed and you can say there's alcohol and DNA alteration, and you'll get some studies, but they don't go into depth. They're all suppressed. Because again, dude, the pharmaceutical company is controlled by the food and tobacco industry and vice versa. So they're not going to put those kind of studies out there. They want people drinking alcohol, dumbed down, zombified, not capable of, reaching their best or ultimate performance. And again, this isn't just in the physical realms. This is in every area of life. So I always tell people that, especially when I go on podcasts, like, listen, if you really want to clean up your act, stop fucking drinking alcohol. Because that shit is an absolute poison. I have not had a drop of alcohol in 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's amazing. I mean, it's sorry because we're on a Muslim podcast, so we don't drink alcohol anyways.
Right. Exactly. No, but I mean, it's good. People should know this. I mean, it's just, of course, you guys.
It's very useful. I actually didn't know that about the cell death and changing DNA. I might do a bit more reading on that and publish something on that for the website.
Cool.
So, assuming, let's say I have, low test, what are the most, before getting a blood test, what are the most noticeable symptoms?
That's a great question. The number one symptom of low testosterone or testosterone deficiency when it's clinically diagnosed is brain fog. So most men, and brain fog is presents as at 2:00, you're a zombie. You cannot get through the day without 3 cups of coffee, Adderall, some form of a fat burner or stimulant, something. Guys are taking modafinil. They should be taking my nootropic, but that's another story for another day. But the reality is that it's the number one symptom is brain fog. And what happens, Nabil, and again, this is in most countries, even in the United States, the guy's at 35 years old, he's a hard-charging executive rising up the ladder in his corporation, and he runs into a wall. He goes to the doctor. He says, "Doc, I don't know what's going on, but I have no energy, bro. I can't get through the day." And instead of the doctor looking at his hormones and looking at his testosterone, he literally writes him a script for an SSRI, which is a mood-altering medication like Prozac or Wellbutrin, or I could go on and on and on, Zoloft. And then they'll also, because normally 9 times out of 10, the same guy says, "And doc, I'm having trouble getting direction." Okay, so the same doctor is going to write a script for an erectile dysfunction medication, Levitra, Cialis, Viagra, whatever, on and on it goes. And so then ultimately the root cause or the root symptom issue, core issue, is that he's deficient testosterone-wise, deficient hormonally, but it is not being addressed. So now you're band-aiding it with a mood-altering medication, which is actually causing permanent alteration of neuroplasticity in the brain. Enzymatic pathways, dendritic pathways, all these things in the brain are being altered, which, again, modern medicine's never going to talk about that because they don't want people to know that they're creating zombies. And then secondarily, they're not testing for the hormones because on average, the average doc doesn't even know what to look for. They're not trained. There's no standard patient of care like we talked about earlier on understanding how to modulate and train or observe symptoms of interventional endocrinology. So you got those two things twofold just cause such an overwhelm to the system that the majority of guys never get treated or evaluated.
Right. I've seen in the supplement stores, they have these supplements that say they're testosterone boosters or estrogen suppressors. Are those something that people can take to improve their hormone profile?
No, they're all complete scams. I mean, there has been a ton of research probably in the last decade on every natural testosterone boosting supplement, Tribulus, horny goat weed, maca, Murinus purines. There's so many of them. There's that stupid one from the African jungle or whatever that's called. I mean, it's just retarded. No, none of them work. I mean, the only thing they do is take money from the people's pockets that are purchasing them, because there's no, clinical proof that any of them work. There are some natural supplements found in nature, and I'm sure there's some formulations, and I'm not up to speed on them like I should be, but that can mildly suppress estrogen, mildly. And when I say mildly, I'm talking transiently. Like if you're a dude that has high estrogen levels because your lifestyle sucks, if you take one of those things and you're expecting any kind of change, it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority of those things are worthless.
All right, you mentioned lifestyle changes. What are some of the things like starting today? If somebody wants to make changes to his lifestyle, what can he do to sort of start towards the path of recovering his hormone profile?
Yeah, it's a great question. The easiest thing I can tell him is literally Google TRT diet. So I wrote an article in 2013 on FabFitOver40. It's like one of the most indexed articles ever written on that. And it's a step-by-step guide on like how to change your diet and then how to do some other things naturally to, maximize your natural production. Now, remember, when I say maximize your natural production, that's like kind of a non sequitur, because the reality is if you live in a large coastal population center, there's no way to maximize your natural production unless you live in a glass tube, with like some sort of a, biochamber. I mean, you're being bombarded when you go outside by endocrine disrupting chemicals and particulates and pollutants. Every time you drink this, every time you microwave something, every time you buy fast food, I mean, it's just, there's no way to avoid it, Nabil. There really is no way to avoid it. So that's, why I'm such a giant advocate of being proactive about this and getting your blood work done, understanding if you have a deficiency. I mean, the reality is that by the time you're 40, and again, this is becoming earlier and earlier and earlier with a lot of people, but by the time you're 40, the likelihood that you have suboptimal testosterone is about 85%. Mm-hmm. That's across the board, across the world. And then you compound that, but you realize that 95 to 98% of that 90% is not being evaluated for this. They're immediately be given SSRIs and erectile dysfunction medications and then made into zombies. And if you ever talk to a guy that was on an SSRI, they will tell you they suck. They don't improve depression. They create more lethargy. You have less energy. You don't want to train. You have periods of the day where you're, where it's working a little bit because it's still, working on the reuptake of dopamine. And then after that, it stops working. And then you're taking these things and it's, they're selective reuptake inhibitors. That's what SSRI stands for. So it's selective. So it's training your dopamine receptors to only work at certain times, which is when you take that fucking shit. So they're terrible, man. I mean, I go on and on and on. Dr. Aaron Grossman and I are partners in one venture. And, I love that guy because he just goes after SSRIs and the manufacturers of them. They are literally the worst drugs on the planet. And I swear to God, I'm not making this up. I bet you that 55% of adults in North America are on SSRIs. It's sad.
Yeah. So, and that would be the sort of antidepressant medication, like Prozac.
All the antidepressants. For all of your listeners, I don't care how old you are, do not touch those things. I don't give a shit how depressed you are. Look to natural means first. Follow the TRT diet. Print that thing out, memorize that thing, start living your life according to those factors. Start training with weights. Increase your vitamin D intake. Increase your saturated fat intake. Get plenty of essential fatty acids, especially 3s. These are things that you can do by natural means to modify or to modulate, having, depression and a testosterone deficiency. I mean, normally depression and deficiency are hand in hand. They really are, and that's why you have a lot of people. This is a whole nother conversation. I'll just briefly mention it, but all these video game kids, they have a biological disease. I mean, this is a dopamine response issue they're having. Mm-hmm. So you try to wean them off of these video games, these gamers that have been on video games for 6 or 7 years and living in their rooms, never coming out. You take them off and there's a biological, a come down. There's literally, a weaning period. And so, but this is all again because of dopamine. There's, this. I mean, just fucking social media and the notifications. People get addicted to that. Those are dopamine responses.
Right, right, right. Exactly. So, I mean, the apps are designed to, create those responses in your mind, right? So that you're staying on them longer now.
Yes.
Like you
I mean,
can't win, man. Like
dude, I
they're
don't even
fucking,
know what, I
they're
mean,
fucking you from all sides, dude.
I don't even know what the video games are doing to young males, though. But there's some kind of hypnotic tuning going on in those things, dude. I mean, again, I have no proof, but I have seen, and my friends of mine who have kids. My 21-year-old is brilliant, and it's Monica's son. He's my stepson, but he's my son for all practical purposes. I mean, he's a gamer. He's a brilliant kid, but I know there's something going on. I just know it. I can't prove it, but there's something going on in those games. I mean, I've heard stories of the people that they recruit, from the black industries, the dark industries in North America that are recruited, as like quote unquote special intel to design some of these video games. So who knows what the CIA is doing with video games? But there's definitely a dumbing down and some sort of a conditioning. I think what's happening mostly, and I see this everywhere, is that there's just lack of drive. It's not dumbing their brains or their intellects, but it's dumbing their desire and their ambition.
Right. Right.
That's the number one thing I see with gamers is they just don't have ambition. They also quit at the first sign of distress. It's that whole, reset button mindset. I can turn the game off. Boop, I can start over. Oh my God, life got hard. Ow, you can't. That's what they do.
That's true. I didn't realize that. That's actually quite true.
Yes. So you have a whole culture, a huge giant generation of millennials that are into that. And even the women are like that. Like, we interviewed some girls from 21, 22-year-old girls in college, brilliant girls. They came over to my house for babysitting. They're looking for summer jobs. And one of these girls was like, I'm telling you, man, when they don't like what you have to say, they just go away. And then there's no response. There's no like polite, professional, tactful, thank you, but I'm not interested. They're gone. If you say something that they don't like or they don't respond to, they're just gone. It's like this weird, like I said, it's like this reset culture. I don't need to be in this. I'm out. And then there's no response. So I've witnessed this recently. And again, like I said, it's males and females. And whether it's being engineered or whether it's just, an evolution of social media, I don't know, but it's really bizarre, brother.
Yeah. So now we've sort of come to the idea of, okay, let's say now I understand maybe I have low testosterone. Where do I go to get myself checked out? Do you recommend any doctors or services for the blood test?
It's a good question. It depends on where you are in the world. This is obviously a very global audience.
Yeah, let's do America, Canada, and UK. Just those three.
No, it's great. So in America, there's millions of private medical companies now that you don't even have to get a doctor's note or a prescription. You can literally just go online. I'll mention a couple. Private MD Labs, discountedlabs.com. Those are both really good. It's as simple as literally going online, searching in their bar of what I want. You could get, like a hormone panel, a wellness panel, an anti-aging panel, whatever, whether you're male or female. And then they're like a couple $100s. You can get coupons sometimes. They drop it 15, 20%. Or there's the company that I represent and I work with that I'm partnered with, which is Checked, which is CHEKD.com. Now, they're not in Canada yet. They're working on getting licensed in Canada, but they're pretty much in 48 states in the United States, also in Hawaii. And they literally will come to your house or your office, take your blood right there on the spot, send it off to a lab, get it measured. And then depending on your biomarkers after you get it measured, and they do this within 72 hours, lickety split, pretty much anywhere in North America, outside of Canada and Mexico, I should say the 48 states. And then, depending on your biomarkers, if you, qualify or show a deficiency in something, they can then have a physician's assistant, a licensed physician's assistant come out to you and give you a full physical on spot. And then literally script you medications, anti-aging medications, testosterone, thyroid hormone, metformin, other medications, again, anti-aging medications based on a clinical need. This isn't like drug therapy or, doc in the box stuff. This is all real medicine practiced via telemedicine or online. So it's very cool.
And it's not sort of, steroid usage type dosages.
No, this is again, you wouldn't get scripted unless you had a clinical need, a deficiency, a measurable deficiency. So it's not just, the measurement, the lab measurement values on a piece of paper, but it's obviously your symptomology, which is, again, what are your symptoms? Again, I'll just hit on them. Five primary symptoms of low testosterone or testosterone deficiency is low, brain fog, cognition issues, sexual dysfunction, lack of libido, and then the other three primarily are like a lack of energy, indecisiveness, and just a lack of stamina. And they're all kind of part and parcel to each other. But those are the five major symptoms of deficiency. And, those five symptoms, if you're suffering from 4 or 3 out of those 5, your life sucks. You feel like shit. You got no energy. I mean, those are the guys. I mean, here we go. Let's just make it real general and plain as Jay. These are the guys who don't get laid, bro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They come home, long day at the office, sitting in the cubicle, wage slavery. Wife wants to have sex every now and then. They can't get a hard on. They're physically exhausted. They have issues, because of the low testosterone, and they're fucked. And then ultimately, again, I don't want to make this a big social issue, but these are the same guys who, end up in divorce court.
Yeah.
Because they can't perform. And the wife's like, well, what the hell? I only want to have sex once a week or twice a month, and you can't even perform once. Dude, I'm done. So it's like I said, man, it is a terrible affliction. It is an epidemic. Again, it's an undiagnosed, and obviously after undiagnosed, it's a misdiagnosed situation too, because even if you're lucky enough to get diagnosed, most doctors don't know how to practice endocrinology.
Right.
I mean, the truth is, I just got an amazing testimonial from a very famous doctor in Brazil. He's actually the most famous doctor in Brazil, and he's a big follower of my work, and he sent me this long email, and I said, hey, man, would you write me a testimonial for the new book coming out? And he was like, oh my God, I would be honored. And anyway, he just sent me this testimonial. And it's so amazing to be able, I was like so humbled. He said, this literally should be required reading for any doctor in the world that practices hormone optimization. And there's so much, and this is like a board certified, super high level guy in Brazil. And Brazil is a very, very, 1-star, 10 level, society. I mean, it's very highbrow. And, for him to say that was like just mind blowing to me. I was like so humbled to see that, but it's true. I mean, that book is the accumulation of like 14 years of research. Right. And I was a ton of doctors. I mean, I'm not some guy that says I'm brilliant or anything like that. I just stood on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah. And
collated and collaborated and just put it out there. But like I said, that book was good, but this next book that's coming is a game changer.
Cool.
No doubt about it.
I'm looking forward to that one. So, okay. So let's say you have, you're diagnosed now, you've done your blood work and you're diagnosed with low testosterone. What is the treatment? So if you're blessed and lucky enough to be evaluated a progressive physician, there's a number of different delivery systems. Okay. There's also delivery systems that are non-testosterone based. There are medications that a person can take that can increase the body's natural production of luteinizing hormone, which in theory will increase your body's natural production of testosterone. Those are drugs like clomid, clomiphene citrate, HCG, which is human chorionic gonadotropin, HMG, which is human menopausal gonadotropin. There's other ones. Those are the 3 primary ones. There's also, which we mentioned earlier, AIs, aromatase inhibition medications. They also, in vivo, have an ability, very mildly, but they do have an ability when taken by themselves to stimulate luteinizing hormone production too, which also will increase natural testosterone. But none of those are efficient. Okay, and that's my personal opinion. I'll have doctors that will come after me and say, you don't know what you're talking about when you say that. But again, I have 17 years of personal use, and I have 60 years of the world community to back my claims. They're just not efficient, because when you use those drugs to increase your body's natural production of testosterone, you don't get the same effect that you get by actually using real testosterone. And again, people throw names around like they say bioidentical. I mean, that's a nonsensical term. All testosterone is bioidentical. Okay, when it's synthesized in a lab as a generic or as a name brand, it's the same testosterone, same as the testosterone that's flowing, hopefully through your veins. So there's no difference. Like, people confuse itself and say, oh, well, I want bioidentical and not like
synthesized or synthetic or whatever, they just get all confused. There's only one form. You can't make a fake form of testosterone. Well, I mean, you could if you're a steroid dealer and you're giving guys Wesson oil, but the reality is that testosterone, when clinically controlled and manufactured, is the same. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, but the delivery systems for testosterone are injectable, which we'll talk about, cream. They have gels and they have creams. They're compounded, and they have the number one selling testosterone product or delivery system is androgel, and it's completely inefficient. And that's also kind of an esoteric technical explanation as to why it doesn't work, but that's written about in the book. You can read about that. But the other delivery systems are worthless, but I'll mention them. They have pellets. They literally insert pellets in like the fat pocket, the gluteal fat pocket of your glute, your butt, which is an absolute sham. It's literally, they're surgically implanted and then they're taken out every 12 weeks. I mean, who the fuck would want to do that? There's risk of infection at the surgical implant point. The biggest issue, though, is that most guys metabolize the testosterone too fast. So they're 7 weeks in and they're fucking eunuch now because they have no testosterone. And now they got to wait 5 more weeks. And so it's oh my God, it's horrible. The other delivery systems are buccals, which is like lozenges, also worthless. And then they have patches, dude. They have a patch you can put on your shaved sack. And you're about to go have sex with a woman. She's like, what the fuck is that? So, I mean, and now they have a nasal spray. There's this thing called Neotest, but, you know, the smartest guys I know that have experimented with these things, they're like, oh my God, it's horrible. Like, it causes headaches. I mean, it's like fucking taking, you know, an inhalant of, what are those, corticosteroids? What's that shit called? The number one prescribed corticosteroid that makes people whack, whatever it's called. But that's what it would be like. So multiple delivery systems, most worthless. The only two that I recommend in the book, and I write very, very, very prolifically about, are injectable and creams. And I'm not a big proponent of creams. When you're working with a really good physician, you can use a very high-powered compounded cream of 20%. Most creams like androgel are scams. They do not increase or optimize blood levels of testosterone necessary to truly feel optimized. But if you do work with a doctor and you're extremely needle phobic, you're basically a pussy. And a lot of guys really are. They can never overcome their needles, which is absolutely a joke to me. But you know, whatever. I don't judge. Then you use the creams. But for the most part, the most effective form from a delivery system standpoint is injectables. And it's also the oldest, known. Thankfully, the technology of needles has gotten so much better in the last 5 to 6 years. They now have super microfine needles that are 30 and 31 gauge, which are like insulin needles, that the oil formulation for injectable testosterone can go right through it. You can inject yourself, here. You can inject yourself here in the upper delt. You can inject yourself in your quad. You can inject yourself in your glute. You can even inject yourself right here in the ab region. I don't recommend that. That's a conversation that you can read about more in the book. There are a lot of guys that do, but there's multiple injection points on your body. So if you're going to be doing this for life, which as you have to, it's not an issue, man. I inject myself with testosterone 3 times a week. It takes me 10 seconds, maybe 12 seconds, to go and inject myself, to push it in, to pull it out, put the cap, put it in a sharps container, and done. So again, these are all lifestyle things. Some people can't inject. They travel with business too much, so they bring creams. I mean, I know plenty of guys that travel around the world, very high-powered executives. They just put their preloaded syringes in their travel bag and they go, Yeah. If they're on the road for 2 weeks, they bring 4 shots or 5 shots, whatever. You can do that. You just put a bag with your prescription, with your holographic medication seal on the plastic bag, and you put it in there. I mean, I've never had anybody that I know of that was called over by TSA or any of that, but there's always a chance. I always tell guys to put it in your check. If you're checking your luggage, put it in your check luggage because it's very unlikely they're going to go through it. But I do know guys that brought it on through TSA screeners and through screening facilities, and they don't give a shit. I mean, I've heard people say they pull it out and they say, "What is this?" And you say, "It's my testosterone. Here's my script. It's right on the bag." And they're like, "Okay." So it's there's not a lot of risk in doing that, but that's by far and away testosterone injectable is the best delivery system, without a doubt.
Okay. Other than reading your book, what are some of the other resources that people can take a look at just to inform themselves better?
Yeah, for
We're
sure.
gonna put
Well, you can
we're
go.
gonna put a link.
You can
Go
buy.
ahead.
I don't mean to cut you off, but you can buy Nelson Virgil's book, which is Testosterone: A Man's Guide. It's older, still very relevant, worthy. Um, Great book. He also has a website, excelmail.com. Has a huge, interactive cloud-based community sharing information. I have a group on Facebook. It's extremely elite. You better be somebody who sent me a request to let you in there, but it's called Testosterone Revolution. It's probably 430 people in the group. But if you're somebody, that follows this and you want to get in that group, you got to friend me on Facebook and I'll put you in there. Nelson also has a couple of Facebook groups. They're much more lay and much more open-ended, for newbies and neophytes. And they're kind of big. There's probably like 8 to 10,000 people in those groups. I mean, just search Facebook, you'll find stuff. But make sure it's either me or Nelson, because the rest of it's going to be bodybuilding bro science bullshit, and you don't want to get wading into there because you'll just be full of nonsense.
Yeah. Oh, and just for people's information, can you give us a comparison between a bodybuilding dosage
Sure.
that people use to get as big as like somebody like Kai Green versus the clinical health optimization dosage that you're talking about?
No, it's a great question. Nobody's ever asked that, dude. Good job. So super physiologic dosages of testosterone really run a range. I believe, this is just my personal opinion. I have a lot of friends who are pro bodybuilders. I've worked in that community for years underground, helping people, advocating, advising. The most elite guys are not taking massive dosages. So it's contrary to what most idiots and bros say. Because again, at the end of the day, if you're involved in selling or pushing anabolic androgenic steroids to bros in bro communities, it's likely you're a drug dealer. Okay. So as a drug dealer, what is your number one goal? To sell more drugs. So you're going to tell guys that so-and-so does X, Y, and Z. Jay Cutler's on 4 grams of this and 1 gram of that. I'm going to just tell you guys straight up right now. Jay Cutler, who's a very good friend of mine, does not use half of what the average pro bodybuilder uses. Okay. He is a mutant. He doesn't need it. He trains like an animal. He has the highest genetic expression of a mesomorphic guy. There are guys like that. Kai Green, you mentioned, Flex Wheeler was a guy like that. What was the guy that competed against Arnold? Serge Nubret. I mean, these guys, there's rare guys out there that are just mutants and they don't need a lot and they just naturally are going to get massive. Now, today also, insulin has changed the game, okay? Guys are literally using 3 or 4 times a day, 12 to 14 IUs of insulin, and then slamming 1,000 grams of, quick absorbing glycogen, like cyclodextrin powders and stuff like that, to ram and super inject glycogen to replete. But to answer your question, 150, really 75 milligrams to 200 milligrams a week of testosterone is a clinical replacement dose, and that's, again, totally determined by response, symptomology, and feel. How do I feel on that? But you don't really see anything over 200 milligrams of testosterone. That's from a clinical standard, testosterone replacement therapy done right in the context of health and longevity. There are idiots out there taking 5 grams of testosterone a week. Okay. Now, I know all of the research, bro. I know all of the research. I've read every bit of research. I've read the smartest guys in the world. Over 600 milligrams of testosterone a week, and this is over a 7-day period, your body is not metabolizing it, okay? You only have a certain amount of receptor expression on your body that is going to allow you to metabolize that testosterone, to turn on all those androgen receptors to receive it. Now, that doesn't mean that some guy can't listen to this and say, Jay Campbell's a fucking moron. I'm on 3 grams of testosterone and I weigh 320 pounds and I'm 8% body fat, okay? Well, yeah, dude, but you're just adding, the testosterone along with all the other things you're taking, your genetically expression has turned on every androgen receptor in your body, and you also have the genes to be 320 pounds. But again, I know the research, I know the half-lives, I know what's going on molecularly. You cannot synthesize more than 650 milligrams of testosterone a week. You just can't. Now, that doesn't mean you guys can't take it. But if you ever talk to a guy that took 2 or 3 grams of test a week and they did it for a long time, ask them about their life. They can't sleep. Their central nervous system is completely turned off. The only way they can even go to sleep is like to take GHB or take some other drug that like sedates them at night. I mean, you're talking a different level. Now, are guys taking dosages like that, Nabil? Of course they are. They're fucking idiots. They're being told by idiots to do idiot things. Idiots, dumb does as dumb does, So it's just like the reality is that, yes, there's plenty of guys out there, but the majority of the top level pros are not taking hardly anything. They're probably on a gram to 1.5 grams a week of of all the different anabolics and testosterone. The difference is they're on massive,
included, right?
The difference is they're on massive dosages of insulin.
Okay.
Some of them are using growth hormone too in combination with insulin, which does work too. But mostly it's just elite genetics, pharmacological quality gear, anabolics with, base androgens like testosterone, and then just massive amounts of insulin. So those are the 3 things. Now, there's obviously some growth hormone thrown in because growth hormone, testosterone, and insulin are a little bit synergistic. But it's like I said, man, a lot of guys would be blown away if they knew what the top pros were doing. It's not that much gear. They're not over 1.5 grams a week. Just not.
Absolutely. All right, man, let's wrap this up. This is the first book recommendation I'm making for becoming the Alpha Muslim. I would encourage all of you to go and buy the definitive Testosterone Replacement Therapy manual. It's available on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle or hard copy. And Jay has graciously offered to provide a free PDF copy, which I'll get the link to, and I'll put it up on the website for you guys to download. But I still do recommend you buy the book and support the work. Where can people find you and your work, Jay?
Well, first off, thanks, Nabil. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I'm all about playing it forward, man. I'm definitely not one of those dudes looking to make money off the book. I'm totally about service to others, totally about educating and informing. The more people that know about this, the less sickness and disease and poor health we're going to have around the world. So I'm I'm a big advocate and proponent of that. So I'll give it out to anybody. And also, I'm literally one of those guys, man. If you email me, I'll respond. And don't expect me to respond right away because I get tons of messages on a daily basis. Like I'm pretty close to hiring an assistant to help me with that, but I will respond to you. So I do respond to messages, but it's most easily found. The website is trtrevolution.com. I do have a Facebook account there too, and people message me there. I don't know. I got 4,000 or 5,000 likes. I don't really manage it very actively. And then you can email me. The best way to get a hold of me and actually expect an intelligent, cogent response is just emailing me at j@trtrevolution.com. My Facebook account, I'm almost at my friend limit. If you come there in that personal well and start asking me questions about TRT, you're not going to get a response. It's not because I don't want to. It's just because I just don't respond to most people on my Facebook wall unless you're like a close friend or family member or something. So that's the easiest way is just email me at j@trtrevolution.com. I am on Twitter, as you know. On Twitter, I'm TRT expert. I will return tweets, most of the time. I don't have that big of a following on Twitter. I just like to go in there and just attack. When I do cardio at night is when I'm on Twitter.
Right.
That's what I do for Twitter.
All right, guys. That's awesome. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave me a rating and review and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And again, buy Jay's book. The PDF will be available on the website, and we'll put all the links to everything in the show notes. Again, Jay, thank you very much for coming. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you today.
Thank you.
To the listeners, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for listening.
Awesome.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.